fucking master!
Get your seatbelt on. Hold on.
Jesus Christ, Joel!
You take 71.
Daddy,
We don't know.
They're saying it's a virus, some kind of parasite.
is it from terrorists?
We don't know.
Are we sick?
No, of course not.
Why did things blow up?
No cell phone, no radio. A minute ago, newsman wouldn't shut up.
How do you know?
What?
How do you know we're not sick?
They're saying it's mostly people in the city. That's why they got the highway blocked off. God, it's Jimmy's place.
The Adlers would take Nana into the city, to the hospital for stuff.
That's right. It would. That's probably why.
You'd have to go a lot, right?
We're fine, trust me.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Brickmasters Podcast, an unofficial Last of Us HBO recap show. I'm your host, Chris Lamberth, and joined by me, as always, is the very wonderful media studies professor, Dr. Veronica Paredes. How are you today, Veronica?
Chris, so excited. Here we are. It's January 2023, Last of Us. It aired. I watched it. We both watched it. Ready to talk about it.
I'm so happy that you're here. When I decided to do this, I did a Mayor of Easttown podcast last year that was relatively successful, and I felt like I wanted to bring that back. And I did that with Leah Bonema, and it was great. And I said, why don't I do something else? The Last of Us is coming out. I want to talk about it with people, and I think you're the right person to do this. You're the right person to break down this show with me, have some good conversations about it, and let's see where we get. We're going to do a breakdown, a deep dive into the show. We're going to talk about some themes. We're going to talk about whatever comes up. Up, we'll talk about it. Because you have not played the game, and this is really fresh for you, share some of your overall thoughts about the show.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because I haven't played the game, but I did watch a playthrough of like the first 15 minutes of part one.
Okay.
And I was going to have questions for you about like if I watched a remake of part one or what it is that I actually watched because it was uploaded fairly recently. But I don't know. I thought that like some of the just seeing it for the first time without having seen that, just the ways that the perspective of the characters, especially in the first part, seeing the whole action through Sarah's eyes was really interesting. I really love the scenes in the escaping from the city, the themes about fungi as opposed to like other kinds of infections is really interesting to me. I thought it was setting up a lot of interesting themes. Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good first episode, and can't help but think about it as an adaptation, though, even if I'm watching it without having played the game, which is kind of interesting.
Sure.
Yeah. How about you? What'd you think?
I really enjoyed it. My expectations were pretty high, but I was I don't even think I was cautiously optimistic. I knew because Neil Druckmann was involved, and Craig Mazin, who did Chernobyl. I watched a few episodes of Chernobyl and thought it was good. I just didn't go back to it. It was just kind of really sad, but
yeah, it's a hard one to rewatch.
Yeah, so I'll eventually go back to it and watch it from start to finish. But it was an award-winning show, and Neil Druckmann is someone who hasn't let me down yet. He's let me down in some ways that we'll get to over the course of this series recap. But as a storyteller, I think he's great. And
Yeah.
so I knew that he was involved and he had his say. And I expected them to deviate in certain ways. So the differences were interesting, and we'll see how it plays out. But for this first episode, I really enjoyed it. I was really just kind of, I don't know, there was kind of this relief where I was just really excited, and there was this relief when I saw it for the first time, and I'm happy to see where it all goes and how everything plays out. Even though I know I have an idea of what's going to happen, because they said they were covering the first part one. They were covering the game. So the season one will take place. All of season one is going to cover the game, everything that happens in the game, the main beats,
Right. The storyline will be part one for season one, part two for season two.
Yes.
Potentially.
And they could probably they'd probably split season two. I mean, The Last of Us Part 2 could be split into 2 seasons, because it's very it's big. Like the average play time through the game of part 1 is about 12 to 16 hours. For part 2 is about 20 plus.
Oh wow. Okay.
So yeah.
I mean, it must have been somewhat, like pretty surreal too, to see like this. It's strange because it's something that you've lived with. I mean, you've played the game multiple times too.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like etched into your brain, like a record or something, like the grooves of the record.
Yeah.
You've played it, and to see it in a TV show must have been kind of surreal and strange.
It was, yeah, a little bit. I mean, I don't consider myself an expert. I'm a fan. There's certain things that I know that the average person wouldn't know, but I do not want to be on this podcast and say I know all. I am the guru.
I mean, you know a lot more than I do, and probably more than even the casual player that just kind of played through it, right?
I guess maybe.
I mean, don't you have like an Ellie figurine? Don't you have like?
I have more than I have. I have an Ellie statue. I have an Ellie like neon droid, which is like just her. But it's her from part 2, though.
I want to see it still. No one else will.
Oh shit! I dropped some.
Won't spoil anything.
That's
okay.
Can you see her?
Yeah.
Screen.
She's
throwing a brick.
So, yeah. Chris is showing me something that's not for the audio listeners.
We might put this on YouTube. I don't know. I might start putting them on YouTube. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the game. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just gonna say I'm not the end all be all. And if you want to email the show and you have questions or comments, you can email the show at Monday Festival Pod.
You're safeguarding yourself against the zealots, the real like devotees.
Yeah. So you can do that. And we'll talk about, what's the differences between the game and the show, and we'll just take it from there. So I guess we'll just get into it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, this is episode 1, When You're Lost in the Darkness, directed by Craig Mazin, written by Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin. The first scene starts in 1968. The year that Martin Luther King was assassinated. We're recording this on his observation day, and the year that my parents got married. Wow. So 1968, there's this ABC Dick Cavett style show. There's these epidemiologists, doctors talking about infections and viruses and pandemics. The host is played by Josh Brewer. Dr. Newman is played by John Hanna. Dr. Sean Heiss is played by Christopher Heyerdahl, I believe. And so the first doctor is saying, basically, in the end, this stuff happens, the viruses happen, but in the end, we always win. We're always, fighting we can kill this stuff. We can kill the diseases. There's vaccines and things like that. He says something like viruses where do I want to go? I'm writing all this. Uh, Basically talking about viruses, and I'm trying to make sure that I have this right. Viruses can make people kill. Fungus can control the mind. Viruses can kill people. Funguses control the mind. And he made the comparisons to like ants and the fungi taking over the ant's mind, and before it kills it, it becomes not just it becomes like a marionette to the fungus becomes a puppeteer to the ant being a marionette, and it keeps the puppet alive by preventing the decomposition. And that's the main fear for Dr. Newman, that could happen. But then Dr. Shanghai says, well, fungus, it doesn't exist. I hope I'm saying this is the right doctor. Fungus like that, it doesn't exist in humans. But then they say if the world got warmer and the fungus would take over humans and there would be no cure. And that's when they kind of the host says, we'll be back. And then that's the intro. That's the cold open. They're definitely making allusions to COVID. Right. What we went through recently, also global warming, well, if it gets warmer, that's not going to happen, and then all this stuff. So basically they're telling you what's going to happen to the people, what's going to happen when we fast forward to 2003. And this is, I don't know if I said this at the top, this is going to be a spoiler filled discussion. We're going to spoil everything, from the game to the show, everything that happens. We're going to try to keep it to everything that happens on the show. Mm-hmm. Like that particular episode, so we're trying to just kind of spoil everything on the show.
Yeah.
What did you think about this cold open, Veronica?
Yeah, I thought it was really, we both listened to the HBO official podcast, and, the showrunners and the creators were talking about the choice in staging it this way, delivering this information about the fungal, the infection and how it's unique in this universe, as opposed to like what we've experienced with COVID or other viruses. So I thought it was really well done. It had some humor. Yeah. I was going to ask you about how humor kind of finds itself in the video game, and if there are moments of humor there. There was some comedy in this, the guy, the host, I seen him in a bunch of things, right? That actor. What was the name of the host again?
Josh Brewer.
Josh Brenner, right?
Brenner. Did I?
Brenner.
I think this fucking notes did a
autocorrect
thing. Autocorrect.
Yeah, so he's been in what was it? I saw him in that Marin. I think he was an assistant to Marin in his show, but also in Mythic Quest he plays a Carl Longbottom. He
was in this rom-com called Baked in Brooklyn, where he dated my girl. What's my girl? Here it is. It's Alexandria Daddario.
Oh, right. Who's in White Lotus.
Yeah, and I said that was one. I remember watching this movie. It's actually a pretty good movie, and it's just that's the biggest. That's science fiction also. This nerdy guy is dating this hot girl. I forget. Yeah. I tweeted something funny about it. But anyway, he was the host. He was really funny. He was just all right, guys. And then it got serious. And right. And he was like, oh, we'll be right back, guys.
And then that John Hannah, who plays the main doctor who's delivering this kind of startling and distressing news, John Hannah, he did those performances were really quite nice. I thought they were really it was grounded, even though it was just kind of, maybe it could be seen as kind of a throwaway or just setting it up, exposition kind of scene. I thought it actually achieved what it the fear about it, and the kind of this could happen, and how we ignore it and ignore it, and then all of a sudden here it is. The the whole thing about fungi is really fascinating too. Just like to think of the parasitical nature, possibilities. I don't
Mhm.
know. There's a lot, and it's not just. Yeah, this will come up later, and like how fungi can actually be a relationship that's like very intimate and like controlling, but at the same
Yes.
time like mutually beneficial in some ways.
Hmm.
So I thought that that was set up very nicely, as opposed to the choice that they were considering, which was more kind of like a National Geographic or Science Channel kind of delivery of this news. I thought it was effective the way they did it. Um, yeah, so that was like very much also the influence of like Chernobyl too.
Hmm.
You think of those kinds of historical reenactments or almost like speculative history. So yeah, I thought it was surprisingly very effective and well done for what could have been a throwaway scene.
Yeah, and you get the title credits because after the events of what happens with that we'll discuss, after the first 30 minutes of the show, you get kind of like this, you get the credits for the game and it's telling you about the outbreak. But you
Right.
don't, you in the show, they're telling you this is what happened. This is what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you just get after the tragic events of what we're going to talk about pretty soon. That's what you get as you get the opening credits. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's great because when I first saw it, I was like, wow, 1968. Okay. And then it's very what do you call it? Like just felt it's very somber when you think about it.
Right.
It's like, ugh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the next scene, it it's 2003. In the game, it was 2013. So they decided to go back 10 years, and it's morning. The alarm goes off. It's who we will learn is Sarah. She's in the bed. She wakes up. She gets up and knocks on Joel's door. Tells him the alarm is going off. They do another cut. She's downstairs making breakfast. Tomorrow by Avril Lavigne is playing on the radio. They cut to
Oh,
her
yeah.
making eggs. She wanted to make birthday pancakes for Joel, but he is he didn't get the pancake mix, so he didn't really care about the pancakes. But it was Sarah wanted the pancakes, and it's Joel's birthday. He is 36. In the game, he's 33. So Joel, essentially, in the video game, he's the same age as me. He was born in 1980. Um, so I think it's interesting that's another interesting thing that they
Mm.
did to age him up in this one. So they're eating, uh, exchange some jokes. You get a sense of their relationship. Uh, Tommy comes in, makes a joke about Joel's age. Also, Sarah like really loves her dad. She's like she pours him some orange juice and vitamin C, and all that. And we find that Joel and Tommy are construction workers. They're gonna have to pull a double tonight because this particular night because the concrete's guy but gonna be there. They got to be done by 9. Sarah's a little disappointed because she wants to spend time with her dad on his birthday. Joel promises to bring home a birthday cake. They hear a report on the radio about a disturbance going on in Jakarta, which is in Indonesia. And Joel and Tommy don't know where that is. Sarah tells him it's the capital of Indonesia. Joel tells Sarah to get ready. She's got 7 minutes. Sarah tells Joel that his shirt's on backwards, inside out. And Tommy says he's losing it because he's getting old. And let's just finish out this part of this sequence. Then they cut to Sarah sneaking in Joel's room. She takes out some cash and his watch that's broken. Then she picks up a switchblade and plays with it a little bit until she hears the horn for her to come outside. She plays with that switchblade. That's a little foreshadowing. I think there's like some parallels to a character that we're going to meet later on after this. What did you think about this opening, this sequence after the cold open?
Yeah, I think it establishes a lot really quickly that Sarah is having to take care of Joel, and it's not like a normal, child parent
Mhm.
relationship in that like they're dependent on one another, and
Mm.
she's like a lot more independent, and having to take care of him.
Mama's not around.
Right, right. Thinking about the humor part, I think, and this is skipping ahead a little bit, but I think that the kind of relationship that they build up about like her leaving eggshells and the eggs and all that
Yeah,
stuff, and like the comedy around that, and her eating with her mouth open or showing her food, is also like even though she takes care of him, she's still a kid, right?
right.
um and so I don't know. I think that kind of, I know that this is not a set of scenes that are in the game, right?
No, no, it's not.
Yeah. And I feel like there is like some interesting kind of texture of the relationships with Tommy, and with like they joke around, and like the kinds of ways that they relate to one another, kind of is to forecast or foreshadow rather the kind of dire circumstances they're going to soon encounter, right? So I was just
Right.
rewatching it, and in that moment when they're driving Sarah to school, it seems like she's sitting in the back, and we're going to see a similar kind of setup of
Yeah,
the brothers in the front seat and her in the back seat in the future.
yeah.
Immediately, I also thought about, okay, so, the kind of question that you had when you heard that Pedro Pascal was being cast as Joel is like, is this guy a white American? What is Pedro Pascal's version of Joel going to be? And even like I was curious about that. And then the brother shows up, and he's played by a Mexican American actor. So I was kind of
Diego Luna.
curious. Gabriel Luna.
Oh shit, Gabriel Luna. Fuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Am I looking at the right? Okay. Yeah,
Just because it's like, yeah, it's not that Luna.
Gabriel.
Yeah.
You're right.
Not the Andor actor.
Oh, that's what I'm thinking about. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Whoops, racist Chris.
And
They all look alike.
he's from Austin, Gabriel Luna,
Well, he
actually.
sounds just like Tommy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean,
I mean,
what did I think
yeah.
about it? Initially, I was just like, because for initially there was talk that Mahershala Ali was going to be Joel,
Oh, interesting.
and I was like, what? I was like, no, people aren't going to like that. And then when it finally, but I think that was just a bullshit rumor. But when I saw Pedro Pascal, I was like, well, then it becomes like, I was like, Joel should be white. I remember talking
Right.
about that, like I remember saying one time, would Joel vote for Trump? I don't know,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Tommy was a veteran. It's Texas.
Mhm.
But you got to think, so you cast Pedro Pascal, and then you cast Gabriel Luna. It's like, okay, so you are making a statement. You're not, Pedro Pascal's not trying to pass, because look at his brother. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then
But
look
they're
at
Texans.
they're
Yeah.
Texans, right? That's a different thing, and we can talk about that. Like, if Randolph was on here, we could talk about like the racial dynamics that those people down there, like how some people are. I've worked with comedians that were from Texas, and they're Republican. They're brown, darker than the two of us,
Right.
and they have certain ideals that wouldn't match with you and I and our fucking woke sensibilities. So
California and New York.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm just, the coastal elites.
Yeah.
So because of that, I'm just like, okay, well, these guys are people of color, and his daughter is a young woman of color. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, that's interesting. Okay, let's see where y'all go with it. So I'm just taking
Yeah.
it. I'm taking it as that, and Pedro's doing. As soon as I heard him, I felt the same way about Mayor of Easttown when Kate Winslet, who's from the UK, is talking like she's from Delco, like Delaware County, and saying Wooder and overdose. I'm like, okay, she's locked in. She's trying. You know what I'm saying? She's doing more than trying to immerse herself into the culture. Pedro Pascal, when I saw the first trailer and whatever line it was, he says, "You don't know anything about Lost." I was like, oh shit, that's Joel. You know what I mean? So it's like he's more than won me over. We'll talk about Bella Ramsey in a bit, but I'm sold on it. I'm sold on him as Joel.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's interesting because it's not just that he should be white. He's like a white Texan. Joel is in the game.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you say. It is kind of race is complicated. Pedro Pascal, even in like something like I don't know how it is in Mandalorian, but in Game of Thrones, he plays a character who's kind of like ethnic in Game of Thrones, but it's not like, it's not the ethnicities as the kinds of ways that we would map onto the real world.
Sure.
He's Chilean, there is just like a very kind of complicated set of relations to whiteness in Latinidad or in Latino identities generally. But for Gabriel Luna to be a Texan, to be, to cast Tommy played by an actor who is a Texan, a Mexican-American Texan, is pretty interesting. So I don't know. We don't really know how that's going to affect future development of that character in the show.
Yeah, I don't think it will. I think that's just the guy. Like that guy just happens to be. It's kind of like, to be honest with you, it's kind of like how you want it to be. Like, you know what I mean? Like air quotes, like how it's like, oh, this guy just happens to be Mexican American from Texas. It's not going to have anything to do with what happens to him. You know what I mean? Right. Just like Joel, you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, because you're going to find out that his wife, Maria, that he's going to meet eventually, is played by Rutina Wesley, I believe, who was a black woman. And his wife was white in the show. I just realized that after I texted Mike, because I saw like a picture of her on the official Facebook account that said Rutina Wesley is playing Maria. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maria's white in the video game. And people are so used to the protagonist to be a white male anyway. So the fact that they went this way, I'm just like, oh, okay, cool. I'm not mad at it.
It's interesting. And we'll see if it comes up, because it might not, like you say, and they might, I don't know if they have an idea of like, is Joel now Mexican American, which would make the most sense given the location. And was there anything there around the kind of racial identity that Sarah had, and how does that change and shift things? You notice that they had the Survivor poster in her room, which is also like an updating a Destiny's Child music poster up in her room, which is, the change in time, but also interesting given the kind of racial dynamic change as well.
The racial dynamic change. She has the same shirt of a fictional band that Sarah has in the video game, but Survivor is a nod to Endure and Survive, which is a saying in the video game. Survivor mode is on the video game. Like that's one of the hardest levels to play on the game. And then it's just, it has a lot of meaning to it, but that's an interesting, it's a really interesting question. I personally don't think it's gonna mean anything, because it's almost like the world, people are fucking racist and can be racist at any time, but it's almost like the world's so fucked up that it almost doesn't matter. But people like you and I are going to kind of lock in on that and see, well, where's this going? And I definitely want to bring it up when we get to later episodes when things happen, because I have I'm fascinated by what's gonna happen. Maybe we'll talk about it later. But yeah,
Okay.
that's fucking great. That's why you're on the
Yeah.
show. Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
So so we get to cut to outside. They're loading up the truck. Joel's loading up the truck. The next door neighbors, the Adlers. I think it's Danny Adler. He's outside feeding his mother. I think that's his mother. What do you? I think the elderly woman is
That's the
Mr.
sense that
Adler.
I got. Yeah,
Yeah,
that it was his mom, not
right.
necessarily hers. But
No,
just that there's a elderly woman that they're
yeah,
taking care of that doesn't have much capacity to uh, subsist or live on her own.
right. And so the neighbor, I think his name's Danny. He mentions I don't know, but the neighbor mentions that Connie wants Sarah to stop by because Sarah hasn't stopped by in a while. Sarah, I guess, would occasionally hang out over there and just sit with them and bake cookies or whatever. Sarah and Joel just says like, "Oh, just make her happy," you know. And Sarah says she's going to stop by after school. Um, and they ask if Mr. Adler asked if they want some biscuits, and Joel says no because he's on the Atkins diet, and that's like so like early 2000s, you know. Like I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
And then they get in the car, and Tommy says, "Oh, I can tell how excited I was to hear that fucking conversation." Tommy has a cigarette in his mouth, and Joel tells him to put it out. They pull off, and we see that that's Tommy's truck. That Tommy has an Operation Desert Storm combat veteran bumper sticker on his truck.
Got it.
As the camera pans out, we see that we're in Austin, Texas, and it's September 26th. And in the video game, that's Outbreak Day. That's considered Outbreak Day. And that's when everything went to shit. So that those moments there kind of like piggybacking off of what we were saying in the earlier part of this sequence was just that it's establishing Sarah, establishing the family, the three of Joel, Sarah, and Tommy, that they have a life, what life was like before everything went to shit. Yeah, any other thoughts on this one, Veronica?
Yeah, I just skipped ahead a little bit. Yeah, that they're in the car. It's interesting. The joke about the biscuits and the Atkins. This is interesting that some of these comedic touches are happening in the scenes. This is also this whole sequence, even up to quite a bit, is like not in the game too, right?
No, it's not in the game at all. No.
So yeah, this kind of I think it's interesting because usually these kinds of shows start in media res of like we're in the middle of the outbreak, right? This is like a lead up to, and I think when I was watching it, I was a little impatient, but now reflecting back on it, these moments of the mundane and like comedy are quite nice, actually.
Yeah, I agree. So we cut to Sarah in class towards the end of the day. It seems like we see a picture of George Bush, and I'm assuming they're in English class because they're diagramming sentences. They're talking about subjects and predicates. It's funny because the teacher says something like, and you're going to use this, you know, like you're going to use this in the future. You don't use that. You don't use diagramming sentences. Anyway.
No. But
Sarah kind of zones out a little bit as she's working, and she's notices that one of her classmates is twitching slightly because she catches the reflection from the light from, I guess, like a bracelet that her classmate has.
Yeah.
Some people say that's like kind of like an early sign of that person being infected. I don't know, but I think that kid was just kind of like just playing around, but it could be that person could be possibly.
I think
infected.
it is. It was subtle though. I didn't get it when I watched it at first. Only in returning to it, revisiting it, do I see that as a foreshadowing of that. But yeah, at the time I didn't. I was like, what's going on with this kid?
Yeah, because the first time I didn't really see that. But then later on, we'll get to it. Like muscle spasms is like one of the symptoms. So I was just kind of like, oh, I rewatched it again. And it was like, okay, that could. I will not argue with that. You know.
Yeah.
Oh shit! Where did I lose my? Okay, and the bell rings. She gets on a metro bus. She walks past the school buses, hops on the metro bus, and she goes downtown to the Lone Star Watch and Jewelry shop. She's talking to the Nasir, the proprietor of the store. He tells her it's going to be $20, and she says, "That's it?" He was like 30. She's like, "No, 20 is good." And he turns away from her and starts fixing the watch. He says it's just a spring, and he's going to fix it. And Sarah's kind of looking around the store, looking at stuff. As she turns her back, you see some police cars, a fire truck, and a SWAT truck speed by the store. His wife, who I believe is named Tahira, rushes in and tells him that they have to close. He says it's 3:15. We close at 7. She yells at him in Arabic, and he says he's done already. He puts the watch in a box and tells her that, and then she gives it to Sarah, says, "You need to go. You should go home." As Sarah leaves, Tahira pulls down the shade of the window shade, and it's a big watch on the window shade. So Sarah,
it's like a nice touch. Just that like little bit of like the watch on the window. It's like, I don't know. That's just like nice.
Yeah, kind of like a big theme, because that's something that we go back to in the first game and go back to in the second one. And so Sarah leaves. She goes home. Before she goes home, she goes to rings Connie's doorbell. And she asks Connie Adler about the news, and she's, have you anything happening on the news? And it seems like Sarah and the watch lady, Sarah and Tahira, are right now currently at this point in time are the only people who are concerned about the news. And she's greeted by Mercy the dog, the Adler's dog, and Miss Adler says, people out there need to get right with Jesus. 3 nails plus 1 cross equals forgiven, and she's like, we're going to make some cookies. Sarah's like, oh, are you going to make chocolate chip? And she says, no, raisins.
Yeah.
And it's so she's like, okay. And then she goes, sees, I don't know if that's Nana Adler, but it's probably is Nana Adler. She goes past her, and she looks on the shelf, looks at some DVDs. And as she's looking at DVDs, you can see Mama Nana Adler kind of spasming in her wheelchair. And Sarah doesn't see it because she's looking at the DVDs. She picks up this DVD called Curtis and Viper 2 off the shelf. And she goes back in the kitchen and asks Connie, can she borrow it? Connie says, yes, that's one of Danny's. She says, oh, I got to leave. My dad wants me home. And Connie gives her some cookies. And Sarah's walking out, and she looks before she walks out, she sees Mercy, the dog, staring at Mama Adler. And as she walks out and notices some fighter planes passing by through the sky. What'd you think of this, Veronica?
Yeah, I mean, this whole sequence from like her leaving school, it's almost like you see the kid twitching with the muscle spasm to this is like there's like just a foreboding. Like it's almost like horror movie tropes in some ways, it's like something's going to happen, and you can kind of read it in the ways that Sarah's just kind of blankly. I don't know. It's interesting because you're worried for Sarah at the same time. She is sort of aware. That moment when you see Nana Adler kind of doing strange things in the background is pretty effective, terrifying. Yeah, big deal. And she's just alone, right? So it's just experiencing the day through Sarah's eyes, and there's not much dialogue other than these kinds of comedic moments at the watch repair place, and then the Adlers. But other than that, she's just we're just quiet with Sarah.
Yeah. So then we cut to Sarah at home on the couch reading a magazine with the news on. It's talking about violent outbreaks occurring in the city. That comes up again. They think it's because of a street drug, some new street drug or something. Joel comes in. He's late. It's 10 o'clock. He's supposed to be there at 9. He forgot the cake. So he's like, well, I'm going to give you a present. And it's his fixed watch. And he says, where'd you get this? How'd you get the money to get this? And Sarah says, drugs. I sell hardcore drugs, straight from the video game. That line. She told him that she stole it stole money from him. It was only $20, but she stole $60 and put the rest of the money back because she's not a thief and she knew that he wasn't going to get the watch fixed himself. Then she says, I got another present for you. It's Curtis and the Viper 2. That's a movie from the game. One of the fictional movies from the game. It's a DVD. Joel's like, oh, the one with the deleted scenes. And they start to watch. And Joel tells Sarah, don't fall asleep. And then the next cut is Sarah asleep. It was so adorable. It was so sweet. A thing that I like that I'm noticing, a technical thing about this show, is the way that they cut. Would you call those jump cuts? It almost doesn't seem like jump cuts, but is it something else?
I mean, it's just it's not quite a smash cut into the next scene. I don't know. Would it be a jump cut?
It's something that it's just something cool that I'm noticing about it. I like what they're doing. Whatever it's called, I like it, you know?
Yeah.
Stylistically, I like, you know.
And I think that's why it's so wonderful is kind of meeting together of like the video game adaptation with someone who's so experienced with like storytelling and these and TV mediums and with Craig Mazin, right? Yeah. It's like I don't know who the editor is of this show, but we could look that up. But yeah, it is quite effective storytelling. Yeah, because it's not quite, you know, it's kind of it's not like
Timothy she's A. saying Good, the editor.
Timothy A. Good. Yeah. And then it's just like a jump code. Well, it is kind of, yeah. There's from that scene just to her sleeping in his lap. There's also very sweet and intimate. You know, it's not a given that one would feel safe with their father. Sarah obviously does.
Right. Yeah, I really like that. It's just, I don't know, after seeing like After Sun and rewatching Somewhere and now this live action version, I kind of want to be a dad, and I wouldn't mind if it was a girl. I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care who it was, you know, but I think I would just feel more overprotective if I had a daughter, but I probably would be, but I would be afraid, but I don't think I would be I think I would be equally afraid. You know what I mean? What? Whether I've had a boy or a girl.
Yeah. You could be sweet with your son too. The son.
That's true. My dad was too. My dad was like that. Yeah. So it just I don't know. Whatever the male equivalent of 1.5 a kid is, I guess.
Yeah. No, I think that's quite natural. That's quite natural.
Yeah. So I really loved that moment. They did it really well. You could tell they have great chemistry together. Mm-hmm. So then Joel gets a call on his Nokia phone. Mm-hmm. And it's Tommy. Tommy's in jail in Travis County because he got in a fight at a bar. Some guy was swinging at a waitress. He said, but it wasn't his fault. And Joel goes down there to bail him out because it's Friday, and if he doesn't bail him out, he's got to be in jail all weekend. And so Joel goes down there, but before he does that, he puts Sarah to bed at 11:03 p.m. Then I guess we'll just keep moving. So the next cut is like Sarah's in bed. She wakes up. It's 2:16 a.m. Helicopters are flying around. Sirens going. The city's being lit up. She's going through the house looking for Joel. This is just like the game. She turns off on the TV. There's a national alert to tell everybody to stay indoors. Mercy, the dog, bangs on the screen door and starts whimpering. Sarah goes into the Adlers. She goes outside, goes into the Adler's house. Another cop, as she's got out there, a copter flies over. Mercy's barking and whimpering hysterically, runs away as Sarah tries to get in the house. She goes in the house and she's calling for Mrs. Adler. She hears a noise in the kitchen. There's clanking and whatnot going on. She gets into the kitchen, almost slips on some blood. She sees Mr. Adler's bloody. He's bitten and bloody. He asks for help. And then she looks over to her right. Then Mama Adler is eating her daughter-in-law, and she looks up. There's these tendrils in her mouth, and then she starts to chase Sarah. Sarah runs outside where Tommy and Joel pull up and tell her to get in the truck. Mama Adler runs outside. She tries to attack Joel. Joel hits her in the head with a big ass wrench and kills her. And then they drive off. They drive off and they run over some of their infected neighbors. Veronica, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, this is like the lead up, like I was saying about the horror movie tropes. It's really until excuse me, Sarah goes into the Adlers. It's really like, what are you doing? The dog is not wanting to go there.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's something bad happening, but the ways that it diverges from the video game is really interesting. The dog is kind of this connection between the two houses.
Right.
And then the reveal of what the infected look like in the act of eating is really cool. You know, like the kinds of fungus. And I don't know if it was a different kind of thing in the video game of how infected fed. But it's a really interesting, not like what you imagine in Walking Dead or in all these other kinds of zombie movies where it's like flesh or whatever. It's like a really interesting symbiotic kind of thing that's happening. It looks really intimate in a way that's not as violent when we first see it, even though there is blood.
Oh, there's a lot of blood. Yeah. In the game, the neighbor comes over and breaks in through the screen door, and Joel's already home. Sarah doesn't leave the house, and they get attacked, and Joel shoots the neighbor, and then they leave, and Tommy's there, and they head away. But it's definitely because there's more of a sense of community, and like these are people that we know. We've established the fact that like, okay, we get to know Sarah, and then we get to know these neighbors before they were infected, and then now things have changed drastically. I like that build up. I just as a viewer who has already played the game, I just had this ominous feeling, but what it did do is make me care even deeper for the Sarah. Because it's like a fully fleshed out person. It's not as great as these actors are, and they're fucking amazing that are on the video game, because they not only voiced these roles, they acted. You know what I mean? They acted their ass off, and they did these scenes not in what do you call it? I forget the technical term. Not like in real life or whatever, you know what I mean? Like
motion capture.
Yeah, they did the motion capture stuff, all of that. And it wasn't like a practical location, So to see it being done like this was just even more compelling. So they're driving away. Joel they're in Tommy's car and truck, and Joel says, it's from a virus. Sarah's asking where it came from. So are we sick? A lot of this is dialogue from the game. Some of it's shot for shot. No, it's coming mostly from the city, and Sarah's putting things together because she's smart. She says the Adlers take Nana to the city a lot, and she's shook, like she should be. She's afraid, and they're trying to find a way to get through traffic. There's traffic jammed up all over the place. They're trying to find a way to get around it. The army's blocking things off. Tommy drives into the field. They only have 3/4 of a tank of gas. People are running around all over town screaming, just like the game. But in the game, there's no plane that crashes in the downtown area. The car is T-boned in the game and gets flipped over. So we get a plane, a remnant from the plane crashes. There's a blackout. And then when the blackout lifts, there's the truck is turned over. Joel pulls Sarah out the car. She can't move because her ankle is either sprained or broken. She can't walk. Joel picks her up, and Tommy goes to find another. Tommy's there, but he has to fight some people off. Joel picks her up and carries her. He says, "Keep your eyes on me," and you cut to infected people eating people. and they're looking at it in their eye line. They see one of them look up and they start chasing them. That's like the first type of infected is a runner. You'll find that there's more. We'll probably meet the clickers next week, but the runner is like one of the first stages of the infected where they see you and they run out. They can actually see you and they run after you. And in the video game, it is kind of scary, but I think maybe what was the movie? Was it Shaun of the Dead or the movie with Woody Harrelson where the zombies ran fast?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know that
Zombieland or something. I think it might have been Zombie, but either way, like
I know that in Black Summer they're moving really quickly, but yeah, I don't know Zombieland. Go ahead, sorry.
And anyway, like this was like when I was watching it, and Mike Brown and I were sitting by each other, and we were talking like that fucking runner was scary because it was fast, but it didn't have any control, and it was just kind of like crashing into stuff, but it was still scary. So they're chasing them through this diner, and they run outside. And as they're running outside, they hear a gunshot, and the runner, the infected runner, gets shot, and is shot by a armed military soldier. Obviously, he's armed, but and then military soldier shoots, and he radios in to his superior. And Joel says, "Oh, hey, we're not sick." He's holding Sarah, and he says, "Hey, we're not sick." She's Sarah. There's blood on them, so they probably think she's been bit or something like that. And he radios in. He says, "I think he says there's a girl," and then he shoots at him, and he shoots him. And then he comes up on him to make the kill shot on Joel. And then that guard is shot by Tommy. And then Joel looks over, he sees Sarah, runs over to her, embraces her. Sarah's crying. She dies. It's plays out essentially just like the video game. This is like one of the most compelling moments of a video game that I've ever played in my life, and it was pretty insane. And I remember when this came out in June of 2013, I wasn't initially on the bus for this. I don't know what I was probably working on my craft as a comedian, but. Mm-hmm. But I knew that the game, I saw the commercials. Oh, this looks good. I'm going to play it eventually. But I remember people on Twitter saying, "Oh my God, the first 15 minutes of The Last of Us. Oh my God. Oh my God." And then when I finally played it, I was blown away. And it's just great acting by Pedro Pascal and Nico Parker, daughter of Tandy Newton, a Nepo baby with skills. It was just really sad because I knew that was going to happen. Right. So it still fucked me up. And as soon as she's like an adorable kid, so it's like, oh fuck, when you see her, it's just like, oh shit, she's going to die. So what did you think of this sequence?
Okay. Well, okay, so the Nico Parker is like a perfect looking human. Like she looks like a video game character, but very different than Sarah. She's just like a beautiful, amazing looking like person that is an actor, but like flawless, tall, like ethereal, like just
her
a
mom. My fault is
Mm-hmm.
she changed her name is Tandiwe Newton now.
Tandiwe, yeah,
that's good. Yeah.
I knew you knew that.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Everybody listening to this, see her mother's movie, God's Country. That's one of my favorite movies of last year. It's very fucking good. Okay, continue, Veronica.
So I don't know. I thought with this scene, and I also watched the first 15 minutes of the video game. For me, and I know that this is the media studies scholar in me, right? It's like, okay, this is the inciting moment, the inciting incident of like,
Yes.
okay, now
Yeah.
Joel has to like revenge, or, this is like something breaks or something happens, and then he goes on his journey, to protect her, and then he's broken in this moment. This kind of, inciting incident, or that doesn't inciting event,
Mhm.
for the actions of a male protagonist is like so commonplace,
Sure.
like
Fridging.
the wife
Yeah.
dies, the daughter dies, the girl
Mhm.
dies, you know so in a way I was kind of, I don't know, it's a different kind of reception or interpretation that I'm going to have
Sure.
necessarily. Yeah. I wish there was more for Sarah to do, or for that character to do. I think that there was a lot more here than there
Mhm.
was in the video game.
Yeah.
Just like being able to experience the day through her eyes and from her perspective. What I was really impressed by in those first 15 minutes of the video game, and then they're translated into the show, is like that journey in the car through the city,
Mhm.
like that kind of, and seeing it from the back seat, seeing it from Sarah's perspective, that was a little bit more like compelling or interesting to me
Yeah.
than she has to die kind of thing.
Mhm.
So it's hard to see the kind of compelling emotional texture that's going on when I'm like interpreting this larger kind of framework of like, why does she have to die for his kind of like journey
Yeah.
to be affected? So
No, I think you're absolutely right. And for people that haven't played the game, there's a perspective, because you start the game off as Sarah, and when you're in the truck, you can, as the character, you can look from a 360-degree perspective. I don't know when you were watching the playthrough, but you could like move the controller as you would like to and
yeah,
see what you want to see. As for the fridging, yeah, I mean, it's like, this isn't, the story's been told before,
yeah, yeah,
but it's the way that they've done it that make it, I think, would make it exceptional.
yeah,
I totally understand, because there's part two. You I mean, it's
yeah.
people had problems with that one too. But for this one, it is. Did they say that in that podcast, in the official pod? Like, they were like, what is it? What's the inciting incident of the story?
Yeah, they say something about like it's that they do mention that, and they
Did,
say it's like them meeting, right? It's like Joel and Ellie meeting that they needed to include in this first episode for people to return, I think, right?
yeah, but well, they did. So what they said was, this happens, this whole everything we've just recapped, and then it's what this next sequence, and
Right,
after that it's over. 20 years later, there's no Ellie in the first episode,
right.
and this HBO said, you gotta give us some Ellie, because nobody's gonna come back. So
Yeah,
this I would say is the inciting incident, because it changes Joel's life forever.
right, right.
And it's every motivation he has. And I think we'll talk about it towards the end of our conversation today. What that means.
Yeah,
Which I was pleasantly surprised about when I saw what I saw. So yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from with this, because it's like, you're killing a daughter or a kid. It's like, it's a cliche. It's a
yeah,
term. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Which isn't to say that it dismisses the whole thing, or that
no,
I'm
no,
like,
no.
closing down on the whole thing, but
Yeah.
this kind of moment is hampered by that kind of cliche for me.
Right.
Um, and that she's shot in the stomach, and it's just,
Mhm.
and she suffers,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's almost like the prologue. It's about 30 minutes into the show,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And that seems like almost like the prologue to the game, right? Is
Right.
it? Yeah,
Well, the prologue is 15 minutes.
right,
We don't
right,
get the world building. That's the thing that you can do in another medium. It's you can flesh things out a little more.
right,
Yeah.
right. So
All right. So we get the fast forward to 20 years later. There's a child walking through some flora, like a lot of flora. You almost think it's a forest, and he comes up. We come to find that he's walking through Boston, and it's everything's bombed out. It's a dystopian Boston, and this kid looks disheveled, and kid's in bad shape. A
yeah,
soldier sees him. They take outside of he's outside of the quarantine zone. They take him into the quarantine zone, and he gets tested in this medical area. They strap him in a wheelchair. There's a nice lady soldier that tells him, we just strapped you on here, to just make sure you're okay, just to keep you safe. And she says, we're gonna give you some medicine, and then we're gonna get your favorite food. And another soldier comes up from behind and tests him with a scanner. Scanner comes up red. The nice soldier doesn't even like bat an eye. There's a shot of on the wall of reported signs of cordyceps infection. That's what everybody infected has, this cordyceps infection. And there's these two
mhm,
signs. One sign says reported signs of cordyceps infection: coughing, slurred speech, muscle spasms, like we talked about a little earlier, mood change. Safety signs begin with you. And then there's another one. There's another poster that says time to full infection. If you get bit in the neck, face, or head, it's anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. If you get bit on the torso, arm, shoulder, or hand, that's 2 to 8 hours. You get bit in the leg or foot, that's anywhere from 12 to 24 hours. Report cordyceps to authorities immediately. And this is from FEDRA, which is the Federal Disaster Response Agency. They're a government agency trying to restore order. We later find that they may or may not be fascist, but we don't know that yet.
right. This is our introduction to them,
It's
right?
our introduction to them. So this so they give him a shot, and we know off the bat that this kid's infected. And then we cut to some laborers working outside, dumping infected bodies into a makeshift incinerator. There's a woman doing this type of work. She sees Joel, who's working with her. She tells Joel, she says she can't do it. A truck pulls up and she looks inside. She can't do it. And it's the kid from the previous scene. They basically euthanized him because he was infected. Joel's working as a laborer in this quarantine zone in Boston. He's a street sweeper, or he does sewer maintenance. Whatever he needs to do, he's doing it to get by. You see signs of oh yeah, I could trying to go through all this and then get your thoughts. Yeah, I think we'll finish this. Let's do this. Yeah, so there's signs all around the city with curfew hours. They pay for things with ration cards. There's one sign that says shoelaces cost one ration card each. Bootlaces are 2 ration cards each. Joel's walking through Boston. There's a sea of people milling about. There's one man that's wearing a Al Gore Lieberman shirt. Message. And as he's walking through, the Fedra is hanging people in the center of town for violating curfew, exiting people violating curfew, unauthorized exit from a Q zone, unauthorized entry into a Q zone. And there's supposed to be deterrents for people to not, to not do bad things to what they deem as bad. So now you kind of see that these motherfuckers are fascists. They're pieces of shit. They've been some people, and they've been found guilty in a military court. Joel seems to be unbothered by all this. He's kind of just passing through, and then he looks over and he sees a Fedra guard who motions him to come over to him, and they go to a secluded area. Joel gives this guy some hydro pills for some ration cards, and the soldier, the guard, is short 5. He says, "You're short 5 cards." The guard gives him some cigarettes. I think that's cigarettes. That's not weed, right?
I think it's cigarettes.
Yeah, I think it's cigarettes too. And the guy, he gives him cigarettes. The pills are like 3 months old, and they talk about, where is this from? Is it from Atlanta? Joel says, "I don't know. I just find them. I just get them, And he says, the guard says, "There's a factory in Atlanta that makes pills and bullets." And that's all they do, pills and bullets. The guard is kind of a douche. He's snarky. Joel takes the bag back from the pills. We find that Joel is looking for a vehicle. He wants a truck, and he's been working with this guard to try to get him a truck. They make a deal, but they got to find a battery. And the guard tells him, "All right, we'll do it. Do yourself a favor and stay off the street, because fireflies, we don't know who they are yet. They've been blowing up shit all week. And it's easy to mistake somebody in the dark because the soldiers have been overworked, and they really don't give a shit." So what did you think about this opening sequence, I guess, and beginning of Act 2, if you will?
Yeah, what is it? I thought it's interesting. Later on, I'm thinking about how old Joel is, because it's something that comes up.
He's 56
in the podcast. Yeah.
And so in the game, he's 3 years younger than he's supposed to be. In the game, he's 33, so he's 3 years older in the show.
53 in the game, and then 56 here.
Yeah, because I didn't know this until I played the remake. Because if you look at it, you can kind of you can zoom in onto his ID card when they show it in the game. I haven't done this. Some other nerd did it. And you can see how old he is. So he was born in 1980. So I know, because I was born in 1980, so I could tell. So he's supposed to be 50. He's 56 now, currently on the TV show.
I think they set up Fedra, all the different kinds of agents that they have. They're euthanizing children with nicely and kindly, but then they're also hanging people for what seem like pretty minor infractions. And then they're also kind of corrupt and buying drugs from black market kind of underground economies.
Right.
And they're also responsible for, doling out rations. And so I think it very quickly gives you a sense of what Fedra does,
right?
And how tough you have to be in order to exist in this future society.
Yeah.
So I don't, not much else other than that.
Okay. Next scene, I guess we'll knock out these two sequences. So we meet someone who we will later find out is to be Tess, a woman who's seems to be held hostage. She's beat up, face is messed up. She's been ripped off by this guy named Robert, who's like a thief, criminal, smuggler guy, one of her, for lack of a better term, colleagues. He's ripped her off. She paid him for a truck battery, and he sold it to somebody else. Robert wants her to forget about it because he's afraid of Joel. He's afraid of what Joel will do to him. And Tess says, "Don't worry about him. He answers to me." She wants to go home and drink until her face stops hurting. And this is basically the gist of the scene. And they're just talking, and he's like, "You got to promise me this." And then we get this until there's an explosion where these guys get knocked out. And it allows her to leave. and she stumbles onto a fight between Fedra and the Fireflies. The Fireflies are a militia group that are trying to restore independence and freedom to everybody. And there are factions of them that we'll later find out to be all over the country. And so they're in a fight. Tess says, hey, I'm not a Firefly. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just trying to go home. They knock her down and arrest her. And then we cut right to a girl being chained up. She's chained up in a room. It's Ellie, but we don't know that yet. But she's been locked up by the Fireflies, and we don't know why yet. They ask her to count slowly. Somebody comes in, asks her to count slowly and clearly from 1 to 10. She does it until she gets to 9. Instead of saying 9, she says, fuck you. And typical Ellie. And they're running her through these tests to see if she's infected. So like I just read to you the signs on the that was on the wall in the medical center. And she says that people have been coming to look for her. They ask her to state her name. She says it's Veronica. She's been there for a few days, and she yells out, I'm not supposed to be here. Your thoughts on Tess and quote unquote Veronica?
I love Anna Torv, so
yeah.
It was a pretty good scene to be introduced to her. I think quickly, just rewatching it, it's interesting because this guy Robert seems quite diminutive in size, and kind of how is he so powerful? And he's got these two tall, enforcers on the sides of her, but she seems even like more like she could physically overpower him, probably.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to think about how one gains power in this world. Ellie, our introduction to her is kind of, she's a smart ass. It's weird. This comes up a little bit more later, but to see Bella Ramsey without a British accent and to see her doing an American accent is kind of weird. But this kind of, I did want to say, the Firefly, we've seen this message. That's the name of the title of the episode, right? When you're lost in the darkness,
look for the light.
Look for the light. Is that the way that the graffiti, that's the Firefly kind of like phrasing or motto, is that right?
Yeah, that's one of their mottos. Yeah, definitely.
Does the graffiti look like that in the game as well? The kind of way that it's written?
Oh yeah, it looks exactly like that.
I don't love the way that looks.
Well,
the graphic design, why is it? Why does it bother me? How do you feel about it?
Maybe you have a visceral reaction to them. I mean, when you start to learn more about them, I'll just say there's not much to like.
Okay. Yeah, there's something, it's just like, can they come up with a cooler motto or something that looks a little bit more aesthetically pleasing than this kind of Comic Sans almost looking like graffiti? But, it's cool. That's the only thing that, like, in this kind of future world building, I feel like a little disappointed by how that looks. But that's a little bit, that's a little finicky and specific. I like that she chose the alias Veronica.
Yeah, there you go. Right. So the next scene, Joel goes into an office of a radio analyst or communications guy, not in the game. He cuts the line. People are like, hey, there's a line. And he gives the guy some cigarettes. He's looking for a message from Tommy. It's been 3 weeks since he's heard from him. Joel wants to get to the tower to reach Tommy in Wyoming. The communication guy tells him that you're capable, but there's raiders and slavers out there. Worse things than infected. And remember that line. There's raiders and slavers out there worse than the infected. Now the infected are pretty fucked up.
Right.
But some of the main themes that you pull from both games is that people are fucked up. Mm-hmm. The infected can't help it, but people can, basically. And he tells him it's the Cody Tower. Joe goes back to his apartment. He opens up his secret stash of smuggled goods, pulls out a map, and starts drinking whiskey and has pills. and there's a shot of his broken watch that got fixed, and then he just crashes on the bed. Now, this is the thing. In the video game, there's no communications guy. Joel has been estranged from Tommy probably for years. So that's different. It's very different from the game. Which I kind of will talk about a little more towards the end of the show today. I guess we'll push on. Fast forward to Tess coming in. She gets in the bed with him. That's not in the game. Hello. And then they do one of those cuts that I like. He wakes up. There's a baby crying outside. Tess is in the kitchen making coffee. She tells him that some teenagers jumped him. Joel gets upset. He tends to her wounds. She tells him she was in federal lockup all day. She tells him about Robert. Joel gets pissed. Because he wants to get Tommy. They found out about that battery. He's upset. He wants revenge. Tess needs him to chill because Robert's afraid of Joel, so he can't just barge in all Clint Eastwood because Robert will just run away. So they decide to hunt him down. How you feel about these two scenes?
Yeah, these are great two scenes. I think that before I was a little bit like this, post-infection world looks kind of like a backlot, like a set. These spaces, the communication office looks more lived in. Their apartment looks more lived in.
Yeah.
The sequence where Joel takes all those pills to fall asleep, it seems like that's the only way that he can sleep, probably.
Yeah.
That's kind of like his way of his habit of being able to even get rest. And then the cuddling up with Tess, that was sweet, Yeah. And the scene that they have together between Tess and Joel, it's really well acted. And there's just something going on there between two actors that we haven't really seen so far, I think.
Yeah.
So it's like the most emotionally poignant scene so far. I think.
He's ready to fuck somebody up. It's like that's his partner, but that's his lady too. They hint at that, there was some romance in the game, but he did love her. That's his partner.
Yeah, and her line delivery of this, but I would very much like you to hurt him. It's
yes, yeah,
so good.
Yeah. So we cut to Marlene, who is played by Merle Dandridge. Merle Dandridge voiced and mocap the character in both video games. I personally had the pleasure of working with her on an episode of Murphy Brown in 2018.
Really? Oh, it's awesome, Chris.
Yeah, she seems
great.
She was nice, and I was kind of a nerd because now she went to Roosevelt University. I think she did undergrad at Roosevelt. I did grad school. We were not there at the same time, but we had that in common. But I led with, "You're in The Last of Us." I didn't say it like that, but I said, "I love that game. You were awesome." And she was really nice. She was like, "Okay, yeah, nerd, but let me get back to the dressing room." But that's how it played out in my mind. But she was nice to me. But I didn't get to tell her we went to the same school. Anyway, she's played by Merle Dandridge. She's the head of the Fireflies in that region. So one of her people, Kim, is questioning her orders because of the fighting and blowing shit up all the time. And, the Fireflies, they want to restore democracy and freedom. And, she and it hasn't been going good for them because they've been at it for 20 years. They've been doing this shit and they haven't gotten anywhere. And to your point, Marlene says, if you fight with Fedra for 20 years, you're not a rebellion. You're just spray paint, and bad spray paint that Veronica doesn't like. That's actually a really good line. None of this is from the video game. I like that. So what she tells them is that Marlene tells Kim, they're planning to leave the QZ because, they're like, "What's going on? What's up with this random girl that we got chained up?" And she says, "Hey, we're going to take that random girl that we got locked up. We're going to take her west, and we need to blow up all this shit all over town to distract Fedra. And she gives her a note from a guy in Salem with the radio tower. I don't know who that is. I'm thinking it's Bill. We get a mention from them a little later, like Bill, and has a in the game. It's Lincoln, Massachusetts. But this one's I don't know if that's him. I don't know if that's him 100%. But there's a guy in Salem, so they could have changed the town, but who knows? All right. So Joel and Tess are out by this mess hall. I guess like some kind of restaurant mess hall type place. A Firefly tries to solicit Joel, and he's like, "Hey, if you ever need," and Joel's like, "I'll break your jaw if you tell me to look for the light." Or so he's like, "I'll break your jaw," and the guy just runs away, just walks away. Tess comes back and she says she gave a guy a few of their cards in order to get some info on Robert. He's taking the battery to a red tag building, and they're planning to take the subway below to sneak up on him. So essentially, in the video game, they do go through all these secret passageways in order to get to Robert, and they do that, and we see that they're planning on sneaking up on Robert. All right, your thoughts on Marlene and this Joel and Tess scene?
Yeah, this seems more like just like exposition kind of thing, like even that Kim and Marlene thing, there's not much there other than we have to deliver some information and kind of give a sense of what Marlene thinks about next steps for Fireflies. But yeah, and even that scene with Tess getting that information, that looks very much like the backlog kind of thing that I'm saying, like feels like a set. Yeah. So I wasn't so in love with these scenes are just kind of trying to explain the situation.
Sure. Yeah, they're just going to sneak up on Robert.
Yeah.
Okay. So we cut to the next scene. Veronica, air quotes, she's still chained up. Marlene comes in with Veronica's backpack and throws it to her. She immediately opens it up to pull out her switchblade. Remember that switchblade? Remember the parallel, maybe the slight parallel or nod to going back 20 years earlier with Sarah and the Joel switchblade. Just like a slight little thing. But Marlene sits down beside her. Veronica tells her to unlock her because she says, just unlock me, because Marlene doesn't seem to be afraid of her. She says, "You're not scared?" She says, "No." So Marlene unlocks her chain. She asks how she feels. She says, "I feel the same." She's like, she wants to go back to Fedra, but Marlene says she can't. And she says, "They put me there when I was a baby." And Marlene says, "They didn't. I did." And then she says, Ellie/Veronica says, "Are you my fucking mom or something?" and she says, "Do I look like your mom?" Marlene knows she's Ellie. And then she says, Ellie says, "Why would a terrorist dump me with Fedra?" And she says, Marlene says, to keep you safe. And she asks, "Was Riley a terrorist?" And that's when Ellie has a pause. That's when somebody actually kind of shuts her down in a way. And you will meet Riley later on, and that's a very pivotal and powerful. I think you find in the realm of this story and in the timeline, for someone who's born post-apocalypse, that's probably her defining moment, one of her defining moments, the defining incident that made her who she was. And you'll see that. And I think I have no doubt that they won't nail that. Where was I going? I was talking too much about that. And then so she says, she asks Marlene, "Why won't you let me go home?" And Marlene says, "You have a greater purpose." And they say, "So we're leaving." A soldier knocks on the door to tell her he's here. We don't know who that is. I'm thinking it's Robert. And Marlene says, "5 minutes." So Marlene says, she tells Ellie, what I'm about to tell you can't be repeated to anyone because if you do, you will die. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think this is a pretty great scene between Ellie and Marlene. Um, I get a little confused about what happens after this scene. So I get a little, when you were saying that they said 5 minutes, he's here, and that's Robert. Okay, that starts to make some sense about what's
Yeah.
about to happen. But the line, you have a far greater, that's a line that gets repeated, right? You have a far greater purpose. I think they hit it. I think that there's chemistry between them two, connection between those two characters that the actors capture well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say that's kind of the important part of the sequence is between Ellie and Marlene.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Because in the game, I feel like this is a conversation that doesn't happen in the game. We don't see this conversation, but that doesn't mean that this conversation didn't happen. I'm thinking that this happened. It did happen off screen in the game. Right. I'm thinking it did. I'm thinking they just showed it to us on the TV show. We cut to Tess and Joel making their way to track down Robert. They go through the subway tunnels. They see a dead, infected person that scares Tess. Obviously, it would scare anybody. In the game, this was a note of not real controversy, but just a note of people being skeptical. In the game, there were spores in the air, and if you were in that room where those spores were, you would immediately just get infected and you'd be fucked up. So in the game, they put on masks. They put on like gas masks, and you're able to move through the space without getting infected, without breathing it in. So in the show, there's the tendrils, like the tendrils that were coming out of Nana Adler, and they can, like, if they shoot out and latch onto you, you can get infected that way, or you can get bitten. So I think they did it because it's like more of a, oh shit, you can't even, there's more of a practical thing where you want to see the actors' faces. But then later on in the franchise, there's pivotal moments that happen around these masks and being in rooms with spores that is just going to change. But I'm figuring out that I'm thinking that there's really two in particular. Really, technically, there's 3 moments. One sequence, 2 other moments that are in part 2 that are like, oh shit, what are y'all gonna do about that when the time comes? But we'll see. These guys are talented. Anyway. So they see this guy and they're making their way through. There's a little banter between Tess and Joel about what he thinks about the architecture, the structure of the buildings, because he's a carpenter. And she's like, oh, there's construction corner with Joel Miller, you know. And they have like a little friendly banter. They're trying to get the entrance is stuck, it's hard to open, and they smell gunpowder, like people have just been shooting. There's blood that runs under the door. They finally get the door open, and there's a bunch of dead dudes in the hallway, Robert included, and they see the battery, and that battery's dead. And then Tess deduces that he tried to sell it twice. Tess calls him a greedy fuck. And they hear the sound of people grunting and groaning. It's Marlene and Kim. Kim's trying to carry Marlene away. Marlene's been injured. And Joel walks towards them. He gets ambushed by Ellie with her switchblade. Joel knocks her down. And that's the meet cute. Let me finish this and I'll get your thoughts on this. So Joel and Marlene apparently know each other. Ellie reaches for her blade. Joel steps on it. Marlene knows that Joel wants to get to Tommy. Joel doesn't like Marlene because he believes that she turned Tommy against him. So they start to make a deal. They say, okay, if you take Ellie to a team of fireflies waiting at the state house, If you do that, we'll give you a truck with gas and guns so you can get to Tommy. And Marlene says, I know what you're both capable of, for better or worse. They don't trust her, but Marlene seems desperate. So they say, if Tess says, if we don't get what we want, then we'll kill her. And Marlene says, okay. And Ellie's like, really? Wow. And Marlene is basically, that's what Ellie basically says. Marlene says to Joel, don't fuck this up, please. Your thoughts on this sequence, Veronica?
So I don't know if I'll hope I won't continue to ask you about like what's included in the video game and what's not.
Oh,
but
feel free to ask, because go ahead.
well, the sequence, where we don't see the shootout between Robert and the Fireflies, we just kind of come in after the action is over.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's something that was portrayed.
Okay, so in the game, you're going, the first mission is you're going to look for Robert.
Okay.
And you go through all these places. In the big shootout is in a warehouse, like a shipping warehouse area, and you're fighting Robert and his goons.
Okay.
And then you finally get to Robert. You're not in the game, you're not looking for a battery, you're looking for guns, because you're smuggling guns and you're trying to get money for that. And it has nothing to do with Tommy. It has nothing to do with getting out of the Q zone. It's just, you need these guns. And then in the show, it seems like it's just kind of like, this Boston is fucked. We've been here for 20 years trying to get right, and ain't nothing happening. We find this girl, the Fireflies are like, we got this girl, we're going to take her out west, because that could lead to something. And but to Joel, it's like, I ain't talked to he hasn't talked to his brother in years. They're estranged. So you're fighting Robert's goons, and then you get to Robert, he runs away, you corner him, and Tess kills him. And you still don't have any guns, because he sold the guns to the Fireflies. He gave the guns to Marlene and her crew.
I see.
And once you make that deal, it's like, Marlene's like, I can get you some gun. Marlene's wounded, and you got to walk back to her hideout. And that's when you meet Ellie at the hideout, because she's waiting. She sees Marlene hurt, so she's going to lash out at Joel and Tess. And then Marlene's like, wait a minute. No, it's okay. And it's like, oh, we're smuggling a girl, like Joel and Tess in the show are like, we don't smuggle humans, and that's where the dialogue happens, and Kim isn't there. It's a funny little moment where she's like, oh, Kim, you can't even hear anything. Your ears got blown off.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So it's more violent. It's way more violent in the video game.
Right.
Yeah.
And Marlene is injured in the crossfire, in the battle between Joel, Tess, and Robert, or it's just like she gets injured some other way?
I think she might have got injured from that, between like fighting with them or something.
Okay.
Or like fighting with Fedra. I'd have to go back and look. Listeners, you can, reach out, message us, and let me know, because I'm not going to go back to the footage. But I think it's either fighting with Fedra or fighting with Robert. But I think Robert's already given them the information. I think it's fighting with Fedra.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's confusing the way they shot it. I mean, instead of the action, we're down in the subway with Tess and Joel.
Yeah.
Which, we get to see the first, infected that's fused into the wall, and we get to see that introduction, and there's something to do with the underground and the ways that the insight that Joel has about them building within to make it to fit more condos in. But it's a weird choice, to miss out on, and I don't know if it was a budgetary thing and they spent all the money on that infected, or why not show the action of the shootout with Robert? It's kind of an interesting. I was very confused when I watched it the first time. Like, what? Yeah. Why is Marlene injured? How did this happen?
So on the show, I'm guessing that she got involved with Robert. They got Robert and his goons. She got in a shootout with them, because in the game you learn how to play the game. So it's like a tutorial where you in the game, you run up on somebody that's been infected and he's about to turn and he's like, please, please kill me. And you have a gun and you learn how to aim and shoot. If you can either choose to kill that person, and if you don't kill him, Tess will kill him. Tess will say Tess is a non-playable character in the game. And if you don't kill him, Tess will shoot him.
Right. So either way he gets killed.
Yeah, either way that guy gets killed.
Yeah.
In the game, in the show, the guy's already dead.
I see. Okay. Yeah. In the show, I think it is like, you're right, that it's like Robert showed up with this bunk battery. And there was some kind of obvious words exchanged about him trying to rip them off.
Yeah.
So, it's just like Robert's this despicable character through and
he's
through.
A piece of shit. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting that we just see the aftermath of this kind of battle. So anyway, maybe it's just like that there was a pacing thing that happened there that I was kind of like, happened here. But, fine. We need to get Joel and Ellie together, and we're getting close to the, this is the third act of this episode.
Right.
So you need to get them together. So I think that there was something in this middle part that I felt like was a little inelegant about how they worked it out. But
I hear you. No, I know what you mean. Yeah, I think, and then that's probably putting 2 episodes together. But sometimes though, when you have a premiere of a show, I think AMC's done this, and I think HBO shows have done this too. Like the first episode might be a little longer than the subsequent episodes. Yeah,
I sense that too.
To establish, the world building and all that jazz. All right, so they're gonna do it, and they're gonna take Ellie to this. They're just taking Ellie to the state house. So Tess and Joel take Ellie to their place, and they put her in another room, and you can hear them talk about Bill and Frank's place. While Ellie looks at Joel has this Billboard's #1 hit book, and she finds a slip of paper inside with some codes, some smuggling codes that we find out, and it has I'm going to read exactly what's on the paper before we decide before we talk about it's a paper. It's like, it says like a slip of paper that says B/F 67 and 80. There's a 60 that says nothing in. The 70 says new stock, and the 80 just has an X. And Ellie's looking at this, and so as Joel comes in and says, so he snatches the book from her. Wait a minute, am I doing this right? What are you doing? Oh shit. Okay. Joel takes the book from her. She says, "What is this? This is like smuggling codes or something?" And Elliot asks, "Who's Bill and Frank? This radio is a smuggling code, right?" And she's like, "60s." She basically says 60s, they've got nothing new. 70, they got new stuff. Joel snatches the book and lays down and starts to go to sleep. Ellie says, "What are you doing?" "Killing time." "What am I supposed to do?" And he says, "I'm sure you'll figure that out." Ellie says, "Your watch is broken." That's pulled directly from the video game. Joel goes to sleep. Not one of those cuts that I like. Ellie tells him, it's later on that night. Ellie says, "You mumble in your sleep." And Joel's wake. He's been awakened by now. Ellie says she's never been outside the QZ. Joel's been outside. I think he says he hasn't been out there since maybe a year, but I don't know if that's true. If he's leaving to smuggle stuff, he's had to have been out, right?
Yeah.
Outside the QZ, I would imagine.
Maybe he hadn't gone on those trips. Maybe it was mostly Tess, or maybe there's other members of the team that were doing that.
I wasn't sure about that,
Yeah.
I don't know. But she's basically looking for reassurance that it's going to be okay. Because that means she's still a kid. She's never been out. She was born there. You know what I mean? She doesn't know anything but the QZ.
Mm-hmm.
And Joel says to her, she says, you some kind of bigwig's daughter? And Ellie says something like that. And then she said, I heard a song while you were asleep. Wake me up before you go. And she says, 80s means trouble. And she's like, code broken. She says all snarky. That something's going on, like I'm thinking that's Bill. I'm thinking the person on the radio, that's Bill communicating to him. But in the game, that device wasn't there. That's just somebody they occasionally will go over and get supplies from, do favors for each other. But we'll learn about them supposedly in episode 3. So they all sneak out after curfew. There's a great moment with Ellie being amazed that she's outside. She's like, I can't believe I'm outside. And as she's looking, the spotlight comes near them and they had to pull her down. She's like, oh, I thought that was funny. Yeah. And then they're sneaking around outside. And there's a shot of Joel where he's just shaking his head like, I can't believe this shit. Like, it's just a quick shot of where he's just like, oh, fuck. So, and then, so there's a shot of him shaking his head. I thought that was hilarious. And then they run into the guard from earlier in the show. He's taking a piss. And he sees, he's like, oh, wait. And he tries to, he, tells him to, stay still. Tess tries to bribe him. And he's scanning them. He's like, nope, I can't do that. My people are coming. And Ellie attacks him as he's scanning them. He gets to Ellie, and then he basically aims his gun at Ellie, just like the guard 20 years earlier did to Joel and Sarah. And we know that because there's a flashback. They make sure that we know that because we get flashback to that moment. And it's essentially the same situation. So Joel tackles the guard, beats the shit out of him with his bare hands, murders him with his bare hands, and takes the machine gun. Right while they're doing this, Tess grabs the scanner and she sees that Ellie tested positive, but she's not sick. And she says, I don't think she says this in the game that it's been 3 weeks since she's been bitten. But she's not sick. Then Joel's looking at his bloody hands and Tess says, we got to move. And they move through this opening with a gate. They move through this opening in a gate, and the gate has a Fedra sign on it that says, warning, biological contamination area. Do not proceed. Then we cut to Joel's and Tess's apartment. There's a song playing, Depeche Mode's Never Let Me Down Again. That's an 80s song. Album came out came out in 1987. So that means trouble. And there's a blackout. That's it. That's the end of the episode. Your thoughts, Veronica?
Yeah. So the sequence, I think that I like the scene where Ellie and Joel are bonding in this kind of way that they share information. It wasn't obvious and it was quite subtle, and I didn't really get it until we were recapping it now. Mm-hmm. The Bill and Frank thing and the way that the information is shared between Tess and Joel, and Ellie's eavesdropping. I thought that was well done. I like that. The dopiness of the guard and how when he's peeing on the wall, it's like his light is on. He's so obvious. He's so vulnerable. He's not a very smart guard, right?
No.
And so that even happening upon him is pretty funny. The very significant scene of they, like you said, they really want us to notice this kind of parallel between Joel's violence in attacking the guard and Ellie's reaction, and that them saying, in the official podcast about that's when Ellie is activated, right?
Yes.
And I did note that, right? Like, it's obvious that when he's beating the shit out of the guard, there's like something that's happening, kind of creepy, almost like like this unrepressible desire that is expressed in like Ellie's kind of witnessing of that
Yeah.
violence. It's creepy. It's
Yeah.
creepy. It looks creepy. It is unsettling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, that's a great point, because I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to go back to that too. The fact that they're making these parallels, but not only Joel's situation, but the fact of who we're finding out Ellie to be and who Sarah was. Because Sarah,
Right.
when Joel kills Nana Adler, like, she's like, you killed her. Like,
Yeah.
yo, like she was really affected by that. But Ellie got energized. One, Ellie's a military kid. She's been in military training. 3 weeks prior, you'll learn later, she's really been through some shit. And she finds, like they say on the official podcast, where she's been activated. She wants somebody to protect her. And she's like, okay, I think I'm going to be okay with this dude.
Yeah.
The one thing that I felt, because they showed us this, you kind of in the game, that moment, that sequence, there's 2 guards and they're checking them. And before they can figure out if Ellie's infected, she stabs one of them, and then Tess and Joel take those 2 guards out respectively. Then they have the conversation about, yo, what is going on with you?
Right.
Who are you? I will get that in the next episode, but like it was it was a real like visceral scene, because it's like, that's Joel's 20 years, like, you're not letting this happen again. And you kind of get that for her early. It's almost like he saw, I don't know if I want to say that it almost feels like the show is a little more hopeful than the first game. Because there's a lack of like, I want to get to my brother. Yeah, I'm fucked up about my daughter. I need to get to my brother. I want to make sure my brother's okay. Off the rip, you're going to do what you got to do to survive in this situation with this guard. But it's like, because they show us that flashback, that leaves me to believe like the show is a little more hopeful and not as dark as the game. I don't know. It just, because it really, the game can be really fucking bleak. And this show with the flashbacks, if they execute it right, which I think they're doing, and I think we'll see more of that, it's going to be how Lost was in its heyday. Because I was talking about that with Mike, like how you meet these characters and you have a feeling you like them or you don't. You feel however you feel about them. Then you get that flashback and you understand why those characters behave the way they do. And then when they're in their current situations, you're either rooting for them or you're not. But you want to have some kind of visceral feeling for these 2 main characters. And I don't know, it was just it was telling that they showed that flashback. I don't know if they think we're dumb to show like, oh, that's just like his daughter 20 years ago. I don't know why they did that, but because it's like, you're going to defend yourself either way. You know what I mean? Right.
I think that
what do you think?
In the way that they describe it, and the showrunners are, Mazin and Druckmann.
Yes.
In the podcast, is that like there's unresolved trauma, right? So he's gonna act in this way because it's not the situation, because he wasn't able to act to defend in that moment for Sarah. He's just, it's not even like he's doing this for Ellie. He's doing this because he's stuck in that moment of not having done it in the past.
Right.
So there's that, but I think that what is already kind of obvious is that that's being exploited in a measured kind of way by Tess.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a reckless possible exploitation that's going to be happening by Ellie. But also this kind of like identification that she has with him. Yes, he's going to be able to defend her, but I wish that I could do that. I wish I could be that way. I wish that I had that power, is kind of what I've sensed from Ellie. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that not only like he's going to be an extension of me and defending me in this way, but I wish that I could harness that kind of violent power.
And see, you hit on something that that's going to be a theme from the video game in part 2, and it's a theme that's going to come back in this. If they do it like I think they're going to do it, it's going to come back, and it's you will see, because when we get to this point, like it just makes me
That point.
it just makes me excited. It's gonna be really fucking good. And in video game lore, it's one of the most powerful things that have happened in a video game, or at least one of the coolest.
Yeah.
With perspective changing and stuff.
Yeah. And, he talks about that in, what was it, in the New Yorker profile, or in the profile, the publicity that's been happening around the show. Druckmann talks about the influence of Eco,
Yes.
and the kind of relationship that happens between those two players.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's really interesting things going on with identification, throughout this episode. Even, we set it up by having seen from the perspective of Sarah in the beginning, and then seeing this kind of like, we're not just watching Joel beat this guy up, we're watching Ellie watch Joel beat this guy up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that those parts of it are pretty interesting, and kind of, like you said, like overcome the possible cliche that may be like the motivation of Sarah's death and all these things. Like there's more going on potentially.
Yes. Yeah.
And the fungi like takes over the brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then so like this relationship of like the marionette and the puppet and all those kinds of relationships, it's like the biological infection that's happening, but then also these relationships between Tess and Joel, and Ellie and Joel, and Sarah and Joel. Yeah.
What'd you think of the closing song, Never Let Me Down by Depeche Mode? Looking at Rap Genius though, like it's like what Rap Genius said, it's about drugs and how they said,
right.
I don't know if this is true, but like you can interpret this record how you want to and apply it to the show, where it's like Joel's a drug dealer and all that stuff, but like taking a ride with my best friend, I hope he never lets me down again. He knows where he's taking me where I want to be. I'm taking a ride with my best friend. It's kind of like Ellie and Joel. Like this is starting.
Yeah.
Like this relationship is starting. And
even in the kind of like when we see Sarah, Tommy, and Joel in that beginning in the truck, it's always kind of like in a vehicle, the truck, and the journey, and the kind of relationship of like family in that instance. But this finding family, or finding whatever this relationship is going to be between Joel and Ellie.
Yeah.
It's very appropriate. I feel like this kind of thing of like upbeat 80s song, and then these kind of bleak undertone of the lyrics is kind of, I don't know. Is it cliche? Does it remind me of Stranger Things and the kind of like Kate Bush running up the hill thing?
Oh, well,
but
and well, in the trailer they used "Take on Me," and in part 2 there's a sequence where "Take on Me" is played acoustically by a character, and it's not like the fun version. Right. It's more of a mellowed out, like chill version. The promotionally for part 2, there's a song that somebody covered. Oh my God. I feel so extraordinary, Something's got, what is that record? Um,
Hmm.
oh God, the last of um, it's in part
So
two.
I was
Go
going to say
ahead.
this thing about like 80s, 2000s to this 23. It's interesting the time periods that are being gestured and
Yeah,
how it works on many different levels of the signals that they're going into trouble. Um, the kind of reaction that Joel had to the Wham song
yeah.
to this. It's like, okay, this is a reality within the game that they're walking into trouble. Um,
Oh, what the fuck is that song? Because it's like, well, I don't want us to get in trouble from playing it, so I'm not. But they have a thing with these 80s songs that are almost like how in those Jordan Peele movies, like where what was Get Out? What song was like Get Out? Like one of those, or
yeah,
Us was like the Beyonce Chopped and Screwed or something, and they kind of had a thing of doing that with like 50 Shades of Grey, where they have an upbeat song and they trying to chop and screw it and make it like ominous,
right. With the
or they
last
make
with us, it was put 5 on it. With
yes. So it's like they've been doing that,
yeah,
and then you listen to the original record, it's like, oh, this shit is upbeat. Um, fuck, I'm so mad that I don't know what that. We'll talk about it after, but
yeah. We'll come back to it. All the
yeah,
80s songs.
yeah. I thought, I mean, this was great, Veronica. Do you have any other thoughts on this, or maybe any insight, any questions about like if something happened in the game or something not? What do you think we're looking forward to in the next episode? What do you expect? What do you expect to see? What do you want to
Yeah.
see?
So I'm right. So this thing about that you mentioned about the raiders and the slavers, and some are worse than the infected. I mean, that's kind of the theme that uh Walking Dead, like, we're interested in. Like, it's not
Right.
like the actual crisis that's introduced by this infection, but like how humanity or how human behavior reacts to it, or how society and culture reacts to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in. I know that the show or the game is uh, kind of the subversion of love, and kind of uh, potentially dangerous aspects of familial or connection between two people and love. So I'm interested to see how that plays out in the kinds of situations and people that they encounter in the journey. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward to seeing how that's going to be worked out
Yeah.
in the next few episodes, and how that'll deepen between Ellie and Joel.
Yeah. Okay, I found it, so I won't lose sleep tonight. So Last of Us 2 had some promo, and they did a acoustic version of New Order. This group named New Order, they had a song called True Faith.
Mhm.
And there was a musician named Lottie Kestner who covered the song, and they used her version, and there was controversy with the oversight because they didn't give her any credit. They didn't give
Oh,
Kestner any credit. So there was like backlash about that, and they finally did.
hmm.
Um, so she should get the recognition. But True Faith, um, I just want to make sure I know when that song came out. True Faith, New Order, 1987. See, yeah. So they kind of got a thing with 80s. Druckmann he likes Pearl Jam, and he likes 80s songs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, I think that's it. I think we've covered everything. I think you did a great job,
Thanks,
Veronica,
Chris.
as
What are you
as you
looking
always
forward to
do.
something for episode 2 or episode 3?
What am I looking for? I'm looking to see some clickers. I'm looking to see more infected. I want those confrontations, and I know it's not going to be like the game. It's not going to be a horde of them. I think it's
Hmm.
going to be like a couple, and to make those encounters like where are my words, to make them more palpable.
Hmm.
So it's not going to be like a clicker in every room. Like in the video game, you got to fight like 4 or 5 of them, and it's a pain in the ass. You got to sneak around and stuff. But
Hmm.
I think it's gonna. I'm really excited to see how that looks, and to just follow along on the story, like with the story, like everybody else, you know, and then
Yeah.
to discuss with you.
Yep. Let's do it.
Yeah.
It's the beginning of our journey. As
Yes.
Ellie and Joel begin their journey, Chris and Veronica also begin theirs.
And there you go. And that's a good way to end it. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. I appreciate you. If you have any questions, comments, hit us up at mundanefestivalpod@gmail.com. This is going to be a Last of Us HBO feed for the next 8 weeks or so. And I have a Patreon. You can check out me blabbing, talking to other people behind the paywall. Veronica's been on some of those too. So thank you so much for listening. I appreciate your ears. And I'll talk to you next time. We'll both talk to you next time. Take it easy, everybody.